Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mok-yeon. With U.S. President Donald Trump's recent announcement to raise tariffs on Korean products, the semiconductor industry, particularly companies like Samsung and SK Hynix, are gearing up for further announcements. And with demand for high bandwidth memory growing, especially in the AI applications, U.S. policies and global competition are reshaping the landscape. On Within the Frame tonight, we'll dive into how these shifts are impacting the future of memory chips and what strategies Korean firms must adopt to stay ahead in the rapidly evolving market. For this, we connect to Sung-Soo Eric Kim, founder and CEO at Datacrunch Global and adjunct professor of Yonsei Graduate School of Business. A big welcome, Professor.
Thank you very much for having me.
And also joining us is Lee Sun-hyung, assistant professor of economics at Montclair State University. Good to see you, Professor.
Thank you for having me again.
So let's start our discussion with Professor Kim first. So like I've said, this week, President Trump announced an increase in tariffs on Korean products, including automobiles and pharmaceuticals, from 15% to 25%. I wonder, how do you foresee this affecting the broader Korean economy, particularly in sectors like semiconductors that weren't really explicitly mentioned?
So I think the current announcement by the United States is quite surprising to the Korean economy and to the Korean government. The logic of the United States is that the Korean Congress has not ratified the trade agreement which was signed in last November. So they're saying that the Korean government has not kept the good faith in the trade agreement, that the investment deal will be made with speed, and the Congress will ratify this so that U.S. can execute these investments together with Korea. For the good faith, the U.S. has decreased the tariff to 15%, but then now they are raising that to 25% again. I think this will have a great impact to the current economy because of mainly two factors. If you look at the last quarter's GDP growth, it decreased 0.3% quarter to quarter comparing to 2024. So our economy is not doing that good. We are expecting to have a 1%, barely a 1% real growth in GDP for 2025. And also we have a very high exchange rate. The Korean won greatly depreciated, so it's around it's above the 1400s. So the macroeconomic is not really favorable for the Korean economy. So this tariff, which impacts our trade, U.S. is a significant trading partner for Korea. So we have to make deals with this tariff situation. And that's the reason why our minister, Kim Jong-un, visited Korea, visited United States from Korea urgently just today to talk with Lutnick and deal with the situation.
Right, it indeed was a very surprising announcement by the U.S. And Korea, of course, it needs to be ready to adapt quickly. But Professor Lee, one thing to note is that South Korea, we had previously received favorable treatment for semiconductor exports under the, quote, most favored nation clause. Then how do you assess the risk of this agreement being undermined?
Yeah, it's quite interesting what's happening in terms of the evolution of this most favored nation clause. So as you know, the most favored nation clause allows the semiconductor industry to actually enjoy a lower tariff rate than the across-the-board tariff rate for all industries. So for example, if the across-board tariff imposed against Korea were to be 25%, then the semiconductor industry will enjoy a 15% lower rate. Now, the problem these days has become in terms of the narrative of national security, where if the U.S. is imposing some kind of license, if SK Hynix or Samsung were to export their products to China, the Korean companies will have to receive some kind of license to do so. And so at the same time, we also see some of the narratives that the US and Made in America First initiatives where semiconductor firms in the United States may be favored over that. That means that this favored clause could always go away anytime. However, we see some of the tailwind in terms of how the Korean National Assembly is trying to progress in terms of the some of the U.S.-Korea trade deal. And most importantly, the Supreme Court in the United States here is about to rule on the IEEPA, which is the legality of the U.S. Tariff against the rest of the world. And so depending on the outcome, we'll see maybe a whole nother story moving forward.
Right, so we'll really have to see how things unfold with a lot of factors weighing in. But even if semiconductors are not really directly targeted by President Trump's latest announcement, Professor Kim, how do you see the potential long-term effects for the semiconductor industry? Do you think this could cause a shift in market dynamics or trade policies?
So Lutnick recently said that there will be 100% tariff unless you manufacture in the United States. That's not only targeting Korea, that's also targeting Taiwan and any other chip makers in the world, if there are, to manufacture in the United States. The tariff situation, if it continues, depending on how much tariff on U.S. is going to impose to Taiwan and Korea, but if it maintains like a 15% to 25 range, I don't think that it's going to be directly affecting the markets in short run because the global semiconductor supply is so much in shortage right now. So the production schedule cannot really keep up with the supply schedule. So, companies are lining up to buy our HBMs and even foundry business. There's a global shortage. So it's not going to affect the global markets and on industry dynamics in short run, maybe this year or next year. But maybe in three and 4 years, if Korean companies lose price competitiveness against United States manufacturers, then the market dynamics can change. U.S. is not the leader in the chip making technology, but if there's a definite price disadvantage for Korean companies, then in the long run, when the demand slows down, then it's going to be a shift in the market dynamics, more demand moving towards United States. So United States can have some time to catch up on the technology and also benefit from price advantage if the tariff situation sustains in the long term. So that's the reason why we have to really deal with the United States to control the tariff, especially on semiconductors and also on our valuable industries.
Definitely, definitely. So a swift negotiation with Washington would be really necessary at this point. But in another eye-opening announcement yesterday, SK Hynix, it reported record earnings in the latest quarter. Professor Lee, how sustainable is this growth in light of the potential tariff increases and the changing global market dynamics for memory chips?
Yeah, to answer the question, we need to look into some of the background as to how SK Hynix was able to achieve such a feat. And really, it was driven by AI boom. And as you know, SK is the primary supplier of AI chips in this new era of AI evolution and technological progress. And so from SK's perspective, they already have and already negotiated with a lot of suppliers in the United States and around the world to supply almost everything this year. And also there has been a preliminary negotiation with OpenAI in terms of the $500 billion Stargate project. And so I think the future for some of the AI boom and AI chips will be very, very promising. And so for the next couple of years, investors and a lot of economists predict that this trend will continue. However, some of the potential risks to some of this trend could include, obviously, geopolitical risks related to the U.S.-China relationship, where technology, especially technology by SK Hynix can be viewed as a massive situation. Or it could be also really just demand structure changing for the next 5 or 10 years. So right now we're at the initial stage of the AI development, but as we move forward, demand might not be sustainable. But other than that, I think the rest of the economy and the political nature is quite strong. So I think people and a lot of investors expect that this trend will continue.
Right. So it'll be really interesting to see if this company would be able to sustain its growth. So with rising uncertainty regarding tariffs, then what kind of strategies should Korean semiconductor firms like Samsung and Hynix adopt to prepare for potential shifts in policies from Washington, Professor Kim?
So I think the fundamental issue with the United States, with not only Korea, but with all the trade partners, is the trade deficit that U.S. is facing against their trade partners. For example, just in the semiconductor sector, we had a trade surplus of about 13.8 billion US dollars against the United States in 2025, which accounts for about 8% of the US chip manufacturing business. So US is seeing a significant trade deficit against Korea. So that's why US is asking Korean companies to come to US and manufacture semiconductors. SK Hynix is investing 3.8 billion US dollars in Lafayette, Indiana, to build their advanced packaging factories, and Samsung Electronics has invested 70 billion US dollars to build their Tyler semiconductor foundry factory in Texas, Tyler. So that's a significant cooperation that we're seeing. But at the same time, we have to think about what we do with our production portfolio. Probably, I think it's the best strategy to supply semiconductors to the United States with US-made semiconductors, and Korea fabs can focus on non-US demands. That's one strategy that we can think about. The other strategy is to leverage the corporate structure of Korean chip makers. SK and Samsung Electronics are conglomerates which have significant other business. So if you look at the chip supply chain, you can consider chip making as the upstream business, while you see data centers as downstream business. We have significant technology to build data centers. SK has Echo Plant and SK Telecom and CNC, etc. Samsung and SDS and CNT. So leveraging the full fleet of the conglomerate system can do significant business development. Data centers are now becoming a SOC concept, so there's going to be a lot of projects overseas. So we should also think about a comprehensive strategy to connect business with upstream and downstream to cultivate the semiconductor industry and take the lead.
Thank you for the tips, Professor Kim. Now, let's shift gears a little bit. So, as the significance of AI-driven applications continue to grow, high bandwidth memory has become increasingly important, as we just touched upon. Professor Lee, could you explain for our starters what role does HBM actually play in the semiconductor industry, and why is it so crucial for the future of AI?
Well, as you know, the HBM AI chips are quite the golden goose for SK Hynix and the semiconductor industry in Korea and around the world. And this really is the demand for HBM AI chips have been growing, and NVIDIA and OpenAI have been demanding all those chips since the beginning. And really, this is really important because it's been used to supply AI hardwares as well as other software that we know of, including ChatGPT. And as the AI application broadens, we'll see that there's going to be more increasing demand for HBM chips. And if you look at the market share for the HBM chips, SK Hynix, it's reported that accounts for about 50%, and Samsung 25%, and US company called Micron the other 25%. So as you can see, SK Hynix has a strong hold in terms of the market share. And as SK Hynix receives more orders from the rest of the customers, we're predicting that the SK will increase the capital expenditure to actually build more factory and more capacity to supply HBM chips moving forward.
Mm-hmm. So we're seeing a growing importance of these HBMs for the AI industry. Professor Kim, then how do you think America's policies, such as tariffs or domestic incentives for companies like Micron, might affect the market share of Korean companies?
As I said earlier, not immediately, not this year, probably not next year, but maybe in 3 and 4 years, it might affect the market dynamics, because the technological policy of the United States has been constant over decades. Semiconductor was invented in Silicon Valley, and the reason why Japan started manufacturing semiconductors was because U.S. Gave the technology to Japan to have them manufacture semiconductors at a cheaper price than Korea, than Taiwan, and also China. But U.S. is trying to take that back. All of their policies are either manufactured in United States, or they will cultivate the U.S. industry parallelly, right? So maybe in a couple of years. Right now, Micron's technology at the best is HBM3. Samsung will soon, maybe next month, they will release HBM4, which is advanced technology. But in 3 and 4 years, who knows? Micron has a technology to catch up. It's more about how do you set the policies. So U.S. have this very, very strong focus of cultivating their policies. So that's where Korea has to really watch out, I think.
Mm-hmm. Right, definitely. Now, as we just spoke about HBM4, we're also hearing that Samsung is entering the HBM4 market and supplying NVIDIA. Professor Lee, how might this development change the global competitive landscape for memory chips?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting that Samsung is about to enter the market for HBM4 chips, which is the next generation of the original HBM chips. So as I mentioned before, the market share for SK Hynix is about to half, and Samsung a quarter of the market share. So it makes sense that Samsung Electronics is trying to increase the potential market share that is going to happen as AI adoption grows. There's going to be a variations of HBM chips, including HBM4 chips for faster computing, better data storage process, taking less energy to process all the data that we know of. And so as we talk about these progression, it makes sense that Samsung is trying to be even an industry leader in a upgraded version of HBM chips as we move forward. And especially with the main customers like NVIDIA, and as Samsung is trying to expand its customer base for the United States and the rest of the world, it remains to be seen the role of Samsung and SK Hynix and how this competition between the two companies can lead to efficiency in the market.
Right, so this entry into the HBM4 would definitely help Samsung strengthen its position in the industry moving forward, and we'll have to keep close tabs on the developments. But as for now, we'll have to conclude our discussion right here. Thank you so much for your insights tonight, Professor Lee.
Thank you.
And of course, Professor Kim, we really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame tonight. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Until then, stay informed and engaged.